here at the chamber, we've received a lot of questions from people about the cannabis industry, what it takes to get in the cannabis industry. I have some money, can I open a pot shop? I want to do deliveries. Or people that are just entrepreneurs looking to invest in the next big thing. And since the city of Hueneme has been very progressive in moving forward with this industry, I have brought a panelist of experts. We have a couple more coming. They're coming from New York, so they will be here in a little while from LAX to join us, but we will start with Rosandra and work our way in.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rosandra, and I'm the principal of the HR firm. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of questions when it comes to employment and how it's going to affect this new and growing industry. First and foremost, let me just say that as employers, regardless of your industry, you are still going to have to abide by the state laws. And the state laws are changing. Just a couple days ago, we had a landmark decision that affected contractors or independent contractors. So you're not alone, but certainly I'm here to assist you. Now, just so that you know who you're talking to, I've already told you my name and that I'm the principal of the HR firm. I come with over 25 years experience, multiple industries. Human resources is not only what I do, it's what I love. What that means is that I love helping you grow your business to ensure that you're compliant. That means that we talk about everything from how to recruit, how to onboard, also how to help people with behavior issues. Also, unfortunately, we do also talk about how to terminate, and certainly everything in between. But when it comes to your human resources needs, we like to think that if you have employees, you have issues, and that's why you come to the HR firm.
Hi guys, good morning. My name is Maytal Manzuri. My first name is difficult. It's pronounced like the month of May and Tall, Maytal. I'm the managing partner at Manzuri Law, which is a firm out of Beverly Hills. So I schlepped up here to come see all of you. And I started in cannabis law a long time ago, before it was even a thing. In 2005, I was on a team that represented a guy named Ed Rosenthal, which was a very famous federal case at the time. And that was, since then, I've kind of evolved my business into advice and counsel for cannabis businesses. Most of you have our brochures that you can take a look at, frequently asked questions. But I'm here to answer whatever questions and myths and mysteries about cannabis and the law and what you can and can't do.
Hi, my name is Tim Moreland. I'm the compliance director for River Distributing. River Distributing is probably the largest cannabis distributor in the state. We represent about 30 brands, and we've sold product to over 300 licensed dispensaries at this point, from January 1st to present. My background is I worked for Hueneme, State Board of Equalization. I was a legislative director, so worked on a lot of cannabis policy. I guess my expertise is a lot of day-to-day compliance issues with the state. I actually, I get to live and breathe this stuff every day. So, and it's very, very, very fascinating. And so we have, attorneys, and there's things written in the law, but actually how the BCC, Bureau of Cannabis Control, interprets it, or other regulators, is a completely different thing. So that's my expertise.
Okay, who has a question? Everybody at once now. Yes.
Can you explain the collective and nonprofit status and how that would affect new businesses?
So the question is, can someone on the panel explain the collectives and nonprofit status?
Sure thing. So just to back up so I can get a kind of general understanding of everyone, has anyone here heard of the Medical Adult Use Cannabis Regulation and Safety Act? Okay. So that essentially put a sunset clause on the collective. What that means is effective January 1st, 2019, what we have known and come to love as the collective will no longer satisfy the legal requirements to operate a commercial cannabis business. There is a difference between a collective and a cooperative, and the law does still allow for certain statutory cooperatives. That's a very specific kind of legal inquiry and compliance model. And we can help explore that, but most people who are operating under the Compassionate Use Act, the Medical Marijuana Program Act, and the Attorney General guidelines will have to get a license by January 1st in order to be entitled to some legal protections. Please.
So there's a little wrinkle too with the collectives. So basically, since my company is a licensed company, it's under the state licensure, we cannot sell to collectives. So if you have a state license, you cannot sell any product to a collective. They're technically kind of on their own in the old system, so we cannot buy product from a licensed distributor or a licensed supplier.
Next question. Yes, Councilman Burke.
Can you define the terms you're using? You use the term collective. What's that mean?
Can you define what the word collective means?
In 2008, the Attorney General actually looked to the dictionary to try and define it, and it's a group of patients who associate for the purposes of collectively growing marijuana. That's what it's been defined as under the law. So previously, if I were a medical marijuana patient and I just wanted to grow for myself, I could grow my 6 plants. If my buddy also had a recommendation, I could grow 12 plants, 6 for him and 6 for me. And we'd have a collective if we had some documents in place and then, right, exactly, expand and expand and expand. And you were allowed to possess or grow the aggregate amount of product that your collective, your group needed.
Okay, so now the collective has grown all of their 6 plants, and they have a lot left over.
Right.
Throw that away? What do you do with it?
No, there was a good case with the Court of Appeal that decided you're allowed to go and then sell that leftover product to a dispensary, and that money would then be returned to the collective. The rub of all of this was that it had to be nonprofit, and so that's why a lot of people establish nonprofit mutual benefit corporations or unincorporated associations, because under the Attorney General guidelines, we're supposed to be operating not-for-profit, which obviously created a whole host of other problems because a lot of people were making what you would deem a profit and then trying to figure out how to make sure that they got paid, but also make sure that they were in line with the law.
Can a collective open up a dispensary?
So up until today, every dispensary was a collective. A dispensary was like a meeting place.
Stop right there. Because you said a collective can sell to a dispensary, can give their access to a dispensary.
Right.
Well, the collective is a dispensary.
Right.
Those terms are the same then.
No, the dispensary is kind of like the meeting place for a collective. Like the shop, the storefront. So you could be a collective without a storefront, or you could be a collective with a storefront. So if I had a collective that I was a part of and that I grew for, but then I had excess cannabis, I could go to this other collective that I was also a member of and sell it on behalf of the collective. Kind of think of like, you could have a Costco membership and you could have like a Rite Aid membership and you could, go to all these different places. It's just that it was highly unregulated and the rules were on a case-by-case basis. We had to wait for 20 years until everything went up to the Court of Appeal to decide as an attorney whether I can say, yes, you should do it that way, or no, you shouldn't do it that way. Because the law as written by the legislators was very vague.
Why do you think they wrote it so vague?
I think they just, fast forward to today, similar situation, they just don't understand the industry to the extent that it exists.
Well, the legislators wrote it themselves, and they didn't consult with anybody. So they didn't know what they were talking about.
It's different
So
to
they wrote it
consult.
very vague.
It's different to consult than to live the business every day, and then to make macro policy that's effective. And also, you're talking about a Schedule I federal drug, so that can further complicate.
Yeah, collective was the one term used, another one started with a C.
Cooperative.
Cooperative.
Cooperative, what's the difference?
A cooperative is a statutory entity. What that means is it's the type of corporation that's formed under the law. You might know like some consumer cooperatives like REI or, there are some other like hiking type companies that are consumer cooperatives. And it's the same idea where the profit or the money kind of stays within the group to better the group. It's just more formally recognized under California corporate law as opposed to a collective, which is kind of this flexible thing that we all just kind of created as we went along.
Thank you.
Next question.
Hi. First, twofold question. How friendly is Ventura County towards the industry and in general, new business coming in? And the second part is, for clientele that we represent, I'm currently working in West Hollywood licensing. There's a lot of restrictions, there are criteria, which is the narrative bulk of the application is pretty extreme in comparison to, they want it to match the corporate culture, the city. How is that approach here in Ventura?
So Hueneme is the only city currently in Ventura County that's open and welcoming to the cannabis industry. Cities are slowly kind of taking a peek, like, what's going on over there? The only other city that has proposed kind of opening their doors is Santa Paula. They're in the infant stages of doing their homework. The county itself primarily was a no. Now we'll see. Ojai has allowed 3,000 oaks, which is a very conservative. City has allowed 1. So baby stepping towards opening the doors.
So would professionals recommend that an interested investor or buy into a pre-existing licensed facility or company or dispensary, or should we apply from start? Now, are they transferable? A lot of the state, I know permits are not going to be transferable. I know a lot of the cities are not transferable. So in essence, is it best to apply from scratch?
I personally would apply from scratch because you're right, a lot of those, yeah, I mean, it's always, it's really tough. We're dealing with this and we're trying to find location in Southern California. So to be honest with you, we're just buying a piece of property and hoping
That it's within the zone?
that's within the zone, that it's going to get approved. So unfortunately, it's kind of a gamble, and I really can't tell you. If you wait too long before they actually permit, if they permit, then the real estate values are going to jump through the
You won't be able
roof.
to.
So I would just, your best, educated guesses. So I know it's a lot of money, it's a lot of effort, but that's kind of what you have to do. And I don't know, maybe the council has something better, but I mean, that's kind of real world experience that we've been dealing with.
The other expert, MGO, when he gets here right now, that's kind of his field of expertise. He helps people decide if it's a good investment to go into a certain area or not go into an area. Because of either saturation or resistance, NIMBYs, or people who they're taking advantage of the market. They're saying, yeah, come on in, and this council or the county has no intention of allowing it. So it's just being mindful of those kinds of things right now. Next question. Tony.
How many dispensaries are approved right now for Hueneme, and how many do you think is going to be, going to take more applications in the future?
So what they said at the council meeting last night is they didn't really put a limit on the number. It's based on space. Port Hueneme is 4 square miles, so there's only so much space. And they were calculating that last night based on what's been approved, what's been open, and what could potentially come forward.
How many is approved?
They have 3, 5. Plus they had some applications in the hopper.
5 more.
Oh, 5 more.
Do you have a deadline for the application? Is it open now?
It's open currently, they haven't closed it yet. Next question.
So, the last I knew, the banking laws said that marijuana businesses were not able to deposit money into a bank, right? Is that still the same? Okay,
I
so,
mean, that's technically not true. Banks can actually deal with licensed cannabis, with the licensed cannabis industry. There are some federal guidelines, fencing guidelines that kind of dictate that. However, they require the banks to go through strenuous know your customer documents, all sorts of procedures that are just really onerous for banks. And really, the banks do not want to take the risk of banking. Most banks do not want to take the risk of banking a cannabis client and then being fined by federal regulators or actually losing their business. They have a lot more investments in the portfolio, so cannabis is kind of small compared to most of those investments in the portfolio. But there are banks that bank the cannabis industry, and there are banks and credit unions here in California that are opening up because Prop 64 was passed, because there's a regulatory structure. Whether or not it's that great right now, but there is something. That's kind of a misnomer. That's kind of a misconception that banks can bank the cannabis industry.
okay, so, let's assume that people though are not using a bank and dealing in cash, right? And so they go to pay their bills, right? Is there any issue with paying your bills from money that's been generated by the cannabis industry?
No, not really. I mean, my company we paid $2 million in excise taxes and cultivation taxes to the California Department of Tax and Levy
And
Administration.
they took the money.
Entirely cash.
Yeah, you have to make an appointment, so if you
So-
have payroll, to make your EBD payroll tax, you have to make an appointment. We have to fill out a form to be approved. Once you're approved, you make an appointment, and then you would take your payment in for your tax. Same thing with the, well, it's now the California Tax and Department, whatever name they gave it, former BOE. They also accept cash payments for your quarterly tax. Most state agencies will accept cash. Depending on the volume of cash, you do have to make an appointment so they can have enough tellers to do the count.
Well, the really kind of frustrating thing is, so, I work in the cannabis industry, I bring down money to the state or to the city, and they take it and they count it, and then they put it into their bank account, which is usually a top-tier bank, Bank of America, Chase, something like that. So it's just completely asinine, like this process we're going through. We can't actually go to a bank. We can't actually have a bank account. In fact, when our first excise taxes to the state were actually made at a B of A branch in Sacramento, where the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration actually met us there. And we literally walked up to the teller, we had the cash, we handed it to the CBTFA officials, and they literally just gave it to the teller and deposited it into the state's bank account. I mean, and then Bank of America got wind of what was happening, and then they shut that process down. So, I mean, it's literally the state is washing the cash for us. That's literally what's going on, or some type of, city government or county government, state regulators, they're all taking cash. So.
Right, so is there any exposure to the people that you're paying?
The state? Or you're talking about like maybe like an ancillary vendor, or yeah, you could lose your bank account. I'm completely honest with you. It happens. People, take money from the cannabis industry. You hear of lawyers and consultants, CPAs, and then they'll have their bank account shut down. So to be completely honest with you, yes.
How close is the state of California to chartering their own bank?
The state of California will not charter their own bank. So if you look at, there's a bill in the legislature right now, actually our former boss, Fiona Ma, is the main supporter of that bill, SB 930 by Senator Hertzberg. So that bill will basically create a system where private banks can actually work with the state and
they can bank just cannabis clients. So they could, literally a private, or actually anybody with enough money could essentially come and open up a bank and then supply their own insurance, and it'll be backed by the state. They'll have some protections. So that was working its way through the legislature. It's been quite well. So we'll see if that's successful or not. To me, it's a great approach because you get away from the state creating a bank. If you're familiar with Colorado, there was this bank called Fourth Corner Credit Union, and they received a state charter. They were basically a state chartered credit union for the cannabis industry, and they were not able to really get that bank up and running because the federal government denied them permission to do that, denied them permission through the Federal Reserve to transfer money, and it was shut down, and they fought it in court for years, and then finally they gave up. And it's just a dead idea. Really a state chartered credit union or bank for this industry, it's just not feasible. It costs too much money. It would cost billions of dollars for the state to actually fund the bank, and then what kind of money it could actually make, the return to the taxpayers, we would all have to pick up. We'd all have to pick that up. And, hopefully this is not a problem in 10 years. Hopefully, the Fed's back off, maybe deschedule, reschedule, whatever, and then we can have banking access.
Yeah. Is there, from your history in doing it with many other cities, is there sort of in Ventura County, Port Hueneme is going to be the only city that has legalized cannabis. Is there some sort of oversaturation possibility here in the city where we have too many dispensaries and nobody's really making a lot of money?
I mean, I think that just goes to general business principles, right? Supply and demand. And are you looking at the dispensary? Are you looking at the cultivation model? Which model are you looking at from a business perspective?
The dispensaries.
The dispensaries, I don't know how many, what the population in Port Hueneme is, but,
22,000, there's 1 million people in the county.
oh, okay, yeah, so you could be, the kind of place to go for cannabis in Ventura.
But then what happens when other cities decide to legalize it, and then all of a sudden, do we have businesses here that nobody's going to come to?
Well, that's a great point. I think you're going to see this in the cannabis industry. You're going to see, right now, there's not a lot of cities, there's not a lot of counties allowing, but eventually they will, and you're going to see competition from other cities, especially with their gross receipts tax. You're going to see fierce competition. It's kind of high right now, but I know cities are actually dropping their gross receipts tax to attract the cannabis industry. Sacramento is a great example. They're stealing business from the city of Oakland left and right because Oakland has a 10% gross receipts tax on adult use cannabis and a 5% gross receipts tax on medical use. Sacramento has a 4% gross receipts tax total. So, it's just way more profitable to be there. My company's based out of West Sacramento, which is right across the river from Sacramento. It's its own separate city. And they have a 2.5% gross receipts tax. There's some places with 0 right now. So there's going to be this fierce competition among cities and counties and I think the issue with cannabis in Ventura County is delivery, because if Port Hueneme is going to allow, if they're going to allow dispensaries, it sounds like they're all going to have some type of delivery arm that they're going to deliver product throughout Ventura County. From what Francine has told me, that's kosher in Ventura County to allow that.
So you have now multiple licenses, delivery, distribution, cultivation.
For the city of Hueneme only, other cities are allowing delivery only because it's already business that's being done. They already know what's happening, they've seen the numbers, so they're like, well, I guess they're already doing it, might as well let them do it. It's kind of where Oxnard just recently did that, so other cities are kind of like, oh, what's going on over here? In the back.
From an owner's perspective, how difficult is it to staff dispensaries and the location where you're cultivating it? Where do you get your employees from?
Where you hire people.
Well, I'm up.
So that is one of the most interesting questions I've heard in a while, because as you can imagine, there's going to be certain industry practices that emerge that we haven't seen just yet. The way that the HR side of it is really looking at this is that it may be a lot like a combination of industries, meaning your medical industry versus just your retail. So if we go and we take away the specific industry and just look at what we're dealing with as employers, we're going to need absolutely to look at what the state is going to allow us for backgrounds. We're going to also need to know what the state is going to require as far as the qualifications for somebody that's able to work in this industry at all. It's so new that there isn't any set standards, but certainly there are certain state specifics. As you can imagine, backgrounds have taken a huge hit everywhere in the state of California. It's not just any one particular industry. And at this point, you're not really able to even garner one unless it is actually something that is needed for your job, which means that for every single one of the individuals or the employers within the industries are going to need background checks if it's only applicable to their positions. It also means job descriptions are going to be key. It means that you're going to need to have your standard operating procedures in place. It means that all of these things are things that you need to do. And then the $1,000 question is, where are you going to get the people that are going to do this? I think that's really not necessarily an industry question, but that's a question for everybody in Southern California. Where do you recruit? Where do we recruit? It used to be that you could go, yeah, I'm going to just totally age myself here, newspapers. You know, you had ads in a newspaper that you go, hey, that sounds like an awesome opportunity for me, and I'll just go ahead and apply for that. There were some ads that were totally blind. There were other ads that were very specific, but that has now morphed into online recruiters, PEOs. I mean, there's all kinds of things that now, as just a population, we use. How is this going to affect this particular industry? That's unknown at this time. However, the state of California is not going to be one that's going to allow it to go very far, in the sense that everybody in general has already started to be really tracked down and talked to about just general employment practices. So when you're looking at where you get your people and how you're going to handle your employees, I don't want you to think that there's any specifics for your industry, because there may not be just yet, but I want you to remember that California is in fact the strictest state in the entire nation. In most places, if they're able to do HR in California, they'll hire you just like that anywhere else because of the different standards. Just like I said 2 days ago, the laws in essence changed for independent contractors. And what I was finding is that the trend in the industry was, well, let's just make them independent contractors and we'll kind of blend it. We'll kind of see how that's going. Well, according to how the law has changed, that is now not going to necessarily be applicable. So again, don't look at it as an industry, just look at it as best HR practices.
So like for us, I work with employment, we're a local staffing company, and so the cannabis industry is something that we've been considering. As far as being able to provide temps, it's been very difficult because of all of the questions that we have in regards to safety and so many other things. So as far as the background that we do, go ahead and look at it, how would we do that with somebody who has a cannabis company who doesn't have money in the banks? So at that point, we wouldn't be able to even run like the credit check to make sure that you are capable of maintaining your payments with an agency, correct?
Well, for employment purposes, you're not able to run background checks such as your credit check unless it's specific for that industry. So
Gotcha.
again, let me just give an example. Accounting individuals, if you're going to go and work in an accounting firm, because your knowledge of money and your credit at that point does reflect how in fact it is that you are capable of making fiduciary decisions, that is something that you could run. But for example, somebody that's going to be in the manufacturing world is not able to at this point to run credit checks on their employees.
Right.
So your credit check is not for employees.
No.
Your credit check is for the companies
Correct.
themselves.
Yeah.
So that does not, that's completely out of my scope from HR, but certainly that would come back to you, whereas how that would be handled.
So which question are you specifically asking for clarification on?
So just for example, when we sign on new clients, you know, we run a type of credit check to make sure that we want to do business, they're a legitimate company.
Okay.
So for the cannabis industry, would that be something we wouldn't be able to do?
That's a great question. I had a client once who, you know, had been arrested 23 times and said that if you hadn't been arrested in this industry, you hadn't been doing it long enough. And the kind of joke behind that anecdote is that you're looking to put a litmus test to a space that's been illegal for a very long time, can't track their banking, you know, is dodging different things, and just recently has come out of the shadows. And so I don't know from a practical perspective how much luck you're going to have.
Gotcha.
As a, you know, you might be able to answer this question as well, but as an independent sort of contractor considering to do business, you can always do a background check on the person you're going to do business with. You can do an asset search, all that kind of stuff, and verify, okay, is this someone that I want to trust? And then you have to go back to kind of your own instinct and judgment. A lot of this business has been based on a handshake for a very long time, and so you have to be able to kind of gauge that.
We do background checks on all our employees, and I think another factor I did talk about with employment is a labor peace agreement. If you have over 20 employees, that's in state law. The unions are going to play a major role in employment with the cannabis industry. River, we have 27 Teamster workers and warehouse workers. So we really value that partnership. Some of the cannabis industry is kind of hostile to unionization. I actually think it's a good thing. It makes us relevant. But you're exactly right. But you can do background checks. I know that. We do background checks.
Do you use any agencies at all for your sourcing?
Yeah, we do, and the name's escaping me right now. So,
Well, we'll get that too.
Yeah.
The other thing too, you can always ask their last 3-quarter filings of the state, their tax filings. That will show you what kind of cash is coming through. And if they don't have at least 3/4 of filing, then they're too new to do business with possibly. In the front and in the back.
A couple of weeks ago, I saw a United States senator on TV that said he was going to introduce a bill to take marijuana out of Category 1. Assuming that might pass, how would that change the landscape of the industry?
I mean, I really think if this product is rescheduled to like 2, where it's treated like a pharmaceutical, a lot of the actors you see in the cannabis industry are not going to be here anymore. Because I really believe that pharmaceutical industry would buy some heartbeat. They know it has some type of value. That's why they fight against it, because it is proven over and over again that states that have legalized medical adult use less opioids. So it really hits them in the pocketbook. So if they could be a part of this, and you're seeing this from a lot of different industries, alcohol, tobacco, pharmacy, they're waiting. They're waiting for whatever that news may be. So yeah, you get rid of all the banking issues, it just becomes like a normal business, but then the cannabis industry that you see right now will not exist if the product's rescheduled. I'm more in favor of descheduling the product, because it's, we should treat it not like a drug. It's not any type of drug. It should be completely descheduled. And then we can fight about who's going to be in the industry and who's going to control it, so to speak. So.
A lot of guys I know are setting up like a 2-3 year plan, and then the idea is to sell, because some people view that as kind of the timeline is when they're going to get rolled up into bigger companies. We already see it on a micro scale where licensing is so unusual and difficult that those with the licenses are currently just kind of acquiring a lot of other smaller businesses under their umbrella, and as the bigger businesses come in, those will be the assets potentially that they want to acquire.
And that's going to happen with any industry. I know that there's a lot of talk in the cannabis industry about the small guy being ran out, and unfortunately that's true to some extent, but I don't know how you would
how you would stop it. Do you want the state to mandate that, it can only be small growers or small dispensaries in the mix or small distributors? I don't think that the state should do that. I think they should stay out of that. We can still have a healthy cannabis industry. There can still be small actors. But to be completely honest with you, if you're going to have cannabis in your city or in your county, you're going to want those actors who are going to follow all the regulations. And unfortunately, some of the people who have been doing in the cannabis industry for a while, really they care less about the rules, or they'll skirt them. So we don't need those actors in there. We need people who are actually follow the law. So.
In the back, over here, and over here.
As a potential job seeker in the industry, where are businesses recruiting? Is it LinkedIn and Indeed, or any suggestions there?
Well, actually, it all depends on what it is that you're looking for. Again, I look at it in terms of what is it that you need the individuals to do. Do you know what they want to do? Meaning, do you have your job descriptions? Do you have a set employee handbook that gives them guidelines for them? Again, it's not industry-based, it's statewide when it comes to certain mandates for your employees. So as far as where you look, it depends on what it is that you're looking for.
I mean, yeah, you see it on LinkedIn, social media, but a lot of it's just who you know.
I think there are some specific job fairs for cannabis industry. There's like THC job finder or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, it's limited.
There you go, THC job finder.
I'd like to revisit the issue regarding personnel and hiring people, et cetera. But to answer your question, you may want to go to the city that has authorized cannabis shops and find out where those shops are, and then visit the shops. We talked a lot about employees and their financial background, et cetera. There are many companies, most companies in Ventura County, particularly hospitals, government agencies, have a zero tolerance for drugs. So if you get caught out at the port, perhaps high on marijuana, you may lose your job. Many companies will have drug screening before you get hired. I know each dispensary will probably have its own rules and regulations, but how do you handle drug use on the job? Can you hire somebody that's got drugs in their system? And which ones are okay and which ones won't be okay?
At River, we have a zero tolerance for drug use.
So the salespeople will be completely...
Yeah, and all our drivers, we have people who drive up and down the state. We don't want them high. We don't want them under the influence of anything. So we have a zero policy for that. If you're caught consuming, we don't do drug tests. I mean, you're not going to get a drug test because, I mean, to be completely honest with you, most of our employees would fail because they use cannabis and it's legal. But you cannot consume while you're on the job. An employer has every right to fire, employer has every right to fire someone who passes, fails a drug test, even though it's legal in the state of California. That's their prerogative, and that's the way it should be. I mean,
So the scenario may be you could get hired to be a driver without having drug screening, but if you get into an accident or fender bender, you have a drug screening and you could...
The problem with a drug screening when it comes to cannabis is that it'll show active in your system for a long time, or it might show as inactive. If you're a consistent user, you'll always have actually a certain amount of detectable cannabis in your system. So that's the problem with a drug screening. So it sounds like with River, they distinguish it's being under the influence while on the job, which is generally the policy for a lot of unions for when it comes to alcohol or other narcotics. You might have an issue where you have like knee pain and you take Vicodin. We might take Vicodin at night. You definitely don't want to be operating heavy machinery when you take it, but by the time you get behind the wheel, it's worked its way out of your system. So that can be a challenge with cannabis, because how are you going to say that someone was or was not under the influence at the time of driving? And that's what we see with police officers as well, with California Highway Patrol, because they can't reliably test cannabis and impairment while driving.
they can do a site check, you know, they can probably obviously tell if someone's under the influence of, you know, alcohol or cannabis or anything. And if say, in that instance, say a driver has got in an accident, and they were under the influence of cannabis, they would probably lose their job. It'd probably be that simple, because we have zero tolerance on that.
Going back to what it was that you were saying, the state does say that each employer has the right to create that policy, which means if you don't have a policy right now, then that's something you need to absolutely draft or have somebody that drafts for you. The other side is that I want you to also know that when it comes to workers' compensation, a lot of insurance companies are now moving towards, if it's going to be a work comp accident, they're going to move towards automatically having a drug screening. And that's again, just because in their minds, they are in essence wondering whether or not they're going to be liable or not, or whether it was actually something that was an accident or something that could have been prevented. Again, all of that kind of blurs the lines when it comes to the substance. However, again, if you don't have a policy, then your employees really can't just be terminated if they don't know. The state of California is a very employee-friendly state, which means that if you want certain policies, you need to let them know. You need to not only post them, you need to make them aware of it. You need, in most cases, to also have them sign off that they will abide by that and they know, and that goes into their personnel files. But for the most part, you still have a zero tolerance policy that's available.
Yeah, and you know, it's a great point about the insurance. The insurance dictates a lot of these, well, I mean, not on our end, but a lot of companies, the insurance reasons are going to dictate, you know, tolerance policies. You know, they should. That's great. There's a bill working its way through the legislature, which I am against. I think it's a horrible idea, but they're going to basically allow, if the bill were successful, to allow medical patients to consume while they're on the job, and I think that's a horrible idea. Actually, it will never work in reality because since employers can decide what their policy is, no employer in their right mind would allow anybody to consume cannabis for a lot of different reasons, especially the insurance reasons. And you're required by state law to have a certain level of insurance. So if you can't get that, you don't have state license. So that solves that problem.
We have a question up front and then.
Two questions. Your company have a website?
Yes, it's our, you know, I've never been on it, actually.
I'm just asking because, you know, sort of what the state of your business is. If you were CVS, you had a website.
We have a website, yeah.
Yeah.
We do. We have all our brands and everything.
Is it River?
I think it's RVRDC.com. Is it? Thanks.
RVRDC.
Rhymes ourselves right.
We can get you a
And
card
I have a
out.
second question. What is your knowledge in regard to the pharmaceutical companies? Are they lobbying to do what this gentleman was talking about?
I would assume in the background they're lobbying, probably not openly, but in the background, yeah.
Because they want
You
peace.
can lobby in a lot of different ways. Yeah. So, and I kind of see, you know, if you watch the news, you have John Boehner, Republican speaker, against cannabis, all his political career, all of a sudden does a 180 and is consulting. You have, there's a lot of quiet movement, I think, gearing up for some type of change in federal policy. It's going to take a couple years, but the stars are aligning, and I think the money's aligning in the right way. So we'll kind of see what happens there. So
Money changes everything.
it changes everything. So you know, I believe there are some very powerful, well financed folks who are trying to quietly influence cannabis policy. And by the time something really happens, it's probably going to be too late. So
In the back.
Sorry, I came in late, so if this was covered, forgive me. But I wanted to talk about along the lines of the retaining and attracting talent portion of things. Is it safe to say because of the bankability issues that the businesses haven't done like 401k plans and health insurance and you know, all of the other kind of like traditional kind of business planning type stuff on top of, you know, buy-sell agreements, and I mean, there's all sorts of stuff that seems that should be in place.
So when it comes to your employees and their benefits, that does fall under HR to a certain degree. And what happens is that that is actually dictated not by any one industry, but rather by the benefits. So for example, your 401k industry, or rather your financial industry that governs your 401ks is going to have certain guidelines. And unless you're able to meet that, it's not going to matter what industry you're in, you're just not able to meet those guidelines. It's not just a matter of money, it's a matter of whether or not you've met the legal requirements to have all of the licensing and everything else just like a everyday normal business would. Now when it comes to your other benefits like sick time, vacation time, and all of that, that's what the employer is allowed to determine. But anything that's outside that has a vendor attached to it, that vendor or that industry is going to dictate what the qualifications are going to be.
Right, so I guess my point being, so say you wanted to set up a 401k plan for the company. Most 401k providers, I'm assuming, are cannabis friendly. So is that just something that the industry is just not doing right now?
It could be, as far as benefits, it could be. I don't know.
Yeah, there's definitely companies that.
We have 401k and all.
Yeah.
So it is possible, it's just finding that vendor that is what's doing it.
So again, it goes back to the vendor. It's got nothing to do with like your company. It's the vendor, so it's an external.
Might cost a little more.
Yeah, I mean, it's a way of attracting quality talent. It definitely helps you offer, insurance, 401k, hell, even a bank account, I mean, or yeah, even a check, so it's, it's definitely a way of attracting the best and the brightest. That's what we ultimately want to do, so.
In the front, and then
I was under the impression, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's only a handful of lounges that have been opened in the States. Have you considered this?
it hasn't really been brought up for them to consider. There has been some discussion of a possibility. Some people that are applying have thought about that, but it hasn't been brought to the council or to the city for consideration. They're currently just doing the dispensaries, cultivation, manufacturing, if you're able to find a space.
It's my understanding of state law, and I'm correctly, consumption lounges are technically not allowed. I know some cities are considering them.
They are allowed. They are allowed.
Alright.
Under Prop 64, they were specifically allowed for, and actually, a retail can just be given that kind of like green light by the city if it wants to.
So it has to be associated with a dispensary?
It doesn't have to be associated with a dispensary, but if you already have a dispensary, it's kind of like an add-on item that the city can allow for, or it can be like a specific only consumption. Some places might not want to let you actually buy there, but just consume and maybe, have dinner or something.
Right.
West Hollywood, for example, has 2 different kinds of consumption lounge licenses available. One is for smoking and ingesting, and they're giving 8 of those, and then the other one is just edibles or ingesting, they're giving 8 of those.
I may be operating off of a myth here, but it's my understanding that dispensaries, collectives, and maybe even lounges, their profits are capped based on square footage of their facility. Is that correct?
Their profits?
The amount they're allowed
You mean by law?
Yes.
No.
There's nothing like that in place?
Your license fees are going to be calculated based on your gross receipts. So if you make up to $500,000 a year, your license fees are going to be X, while if you make up to $4.5 million a year, license fees can be as much as $120,000.
Are you talking about there's a set rate on the markup as far as the excise tax is concerned?
That might be
That is what you're talking
was-
about? Oh, okay.
What I was led to believe.
That's the only thing that's been like, there's like a set number, and that changes every 6 months. So, yeah, so that's the only set number I know.
I have a question for you, but just to point back on the 401k, I think the biggest dictation for 401k is how many participants are going to be part of the plan, and the same thing with healthcare. There's a lot of small companies, the employees don't want to participate, it costs so much money, so it's harder to get the plan together. Question, historically, it sounds like you have a big distribution span throughout California. being a small town and it's growing and has so many dispensaries, looking in the future, 2 years from now, but do you think the culture is going to change here? How important you culture, do you think, in your opinion, would be?
You mean the cannabis culture or the culture of the city?
The city.
To be completely honest, I really don't think it's going to change the culture all that bit. It's going to be another commodity that is going to be sold, and I don't think it's going to, it's not going to harm your community at all. In fact, it's just going to bring extra tax revenue and probably make the streets surrounding the cannabis dispensary a little bit safer. That's probably all it's going to do. There's going to be no impact to the city's culture or anything like that. So
One thing we're seeing cities do to kind of counter that potential risk is education. Educating people on dose amounts, when not to operate a vehicle, not to keep around children, all those kinds of things that you might think are common sense, but in your everyday practice, you might take for granted or not think about. So that's one way that the community can take a proactive approach to ensure that cannabis, which is a safe substance to a large extent, but there are risks associated with it, and those, that is countered by education and, protecting citizens.
And the education should really, in my opinion, not come from the city. It should come from the actual industry operators that have permission to operate in the city. It's a privilege to be able to have a license to be able to operate in the city and conduct business and make money off of that. So you, as an industry operator, need to provide that education. You need to be out there being the shining light, so no one thinks you're, some bad actor who's just trying to get rich and take advantage of that permit. There's that out there, and as you see this industry mature, those actors are going to be out really fast.
See, I think, and don't get me wrong, as I moved out to Oxnard from Los Angeles, I thought gold was lined in the streets. This is a farming community. And it's not the same as you're thinking of back, in Beverly Hills or something like that, or even North Hollywood. What we have here, the only approvals have not been for social marijuana. They've only been for medical marijuana. I think your indication of education is probably the single most important thing to get across to the community. But to start talking, and when I say this, to start talking about places where, people are going to gather and start smoking, okay, I think the city of Port Hueneme might not be totally, the residents of the city of Port Hueneme might not be ready for that.
I think I agree with you. I think, I don't live here, but you guys are just considering opening up dispensaries, baby steps. One of my knocks on the industry, and I'm a part of the industry, is they want everything right now. Give me everything. I want to change everything that's ever been wrong right now, and I want to make as much money as I can. And really, that's kind of a childish way of thinking about this.
Exactly.
We have to be honest with ourselves. This is a Schedule I drug, it's still on the federal level. A lot of people, even though Proposition 64 passed almost a mandate, in the 60% range, a lot of people are uncomfortable with it. And so, as industry actors, we don't need to walk into a city or county with guns blazing and say, hey, this is the way we're going to do it, and screw you, and it shouldn't be that way. It should be, if they want to operate in your county or city, we're going to be a community partner, we're going to work with you, what do you want? That's the way my company's done it. We've drafted ordinances in West Sacramento, and we worked collaboratively with the city and gave them the amount of money they wanted, and the projects they wanted. That's the way you're supposed to do it. You're not supposed to come in and, ask for consumption lounges and whatever, right away. This is definitely not San Francisco or West Hollywood or Los Angeles, so definitely I agree with you.
Not true.
You have a question?
Yeah, has the city played with conditional use permits?
conditional use permits?
The CUP, Control Officer, that's been done in West Hollywood and Malibu. How do you guys feel about CUPs?
Most businesses don't like them. They're arduous and drawn out. They're financially very difficult because you have to hold down a location while not being operational to get the CUP. And then in a lot of cities, the CUP process is the police department oversees it. And historically, the police department and the cannabis industry, don't always mesh. And so that's another source of tension, right or wrong, between, the industry and that process. But it does work in vetting.
Place for CUPs and should not have been the issue. The whole city of CUPs still has CUPs.
A lot of cities have similar processes. Yeah, similar cities have similar processes to a CUP that might be like in LA, they're going to do something similar, but instead of the police department overseeing it, they're going to have a specific commission to oversee it. The issues associated with cannabis use, I don't know if the police department is the right department to handle a lot of that administrative and nuanced legal stuff. But in places where CUPs have been issued, I can't speak to whether any have been, withheld or withdrawn, but I can speak to the fact that some businesses just get lost during the process.
I like the development agreement. I think it's a relationship. It's not, it's just this relationship, this strong relationship you build with your local government. That's the kind of, we have development agreements everywhere. And so, yeah, everybody's involved with our development agreement. We West Sacramento, Santa Rosa, they come by all the time and they check out our facility, and we talk to the city manager, we talk to the city attorney. We're in constant collaboration with them. Just because they gave us that agreement, we just didn't walk away. What's that? We have code enforcement. They always, we're scrutinized, and we welcome it. It's like, come by, we're waiting for the state to come by. We want them to check us out as well. So, I personally like to develop an agreement.
More questions?
Earlier you said that the city of Port Hueneme was 4 square miles per month.
Yeah, 4 square miles.
Does that include the base?
Yes. You blinking.
So the base is what, 60%?
It's maybe a hair more, but it's a good part of
There's
that.
not much room here.
It's comfy and cozy.
Yes, it is.
To the back.
Say I have a cannabis product, specifically a topical. How do I legally distribute and sell it to dispensaries? What steps should I be taking, to get to that level?
First things first.
No, go for it.
You have to get local approval. You have to get local approval from whatever city you reside or your business resides in to manufacture. You're going to get a manufacturing license. Then you're going to have to go, once you get the approval by the locals, you're going to have to go to the state. Then you're going to have to get a state license, California Department of Public Health through manufacturing. And then once all that's done, you're going to have to make sure your product is raised in child-resistant, tamper-evident, properly labeled packaging. And then at that point, then you can actually sell it to a distributor. You find a distributor partner because it's a law product. And you could actually get your own distribution license if you wanted to go that route. I wouldn't recommend it, maybe I'm kind of jaded. But and then you find a distributor, and that distributor can distribute that product and sell it to a licensed retailer. So that's essentially the nuts and the bolts. There's a lot more to it, but I don't want to overcomplicate it and steer you away.
Good overview. You're going to need, you need a
business formation, a lot of local cities, need you to have a business plan. There are different components of different applications. And then, and that's how, you're gonna get started to get your local, is really getting your business plan together, the standard operating procedures together, if that city requires it. You need a piece of real estate, because to get a license in the state of California for a cannabis business, you need a piece of commercial real estate. You can't be doing it out of your home. And so finding that location is usually the first step and the biggest barrier for startups in the cannabis space. Some cities, West Hollywood for example, are not requiring you to have real estate before getting your license. So that's something that might vary from city to city, but in large part, most cities require that you have a location before you get approval. Which can be like a chicken and egg situation, because your landlord wants to see that you have approval, and the city wants to see that you have landlord approval. And so sometimes you're stuck in that situation where you're trying to get something from each of them. And so what we tend to do, we'll try and talk to the landlord and ask for like a contingent authorization, which means that you get the lease, you get the authorization contingent, or depending on the fact that you are going to get a license.
And then the $1 million question is, what kind of cash does that take? So that's where John comes in. So he would like to know about getting a topical product out to the market and being able to distribute it. So what kind of cash would it take to get a product like that out?
So that's a very complicated question, because there are many variables that come into that question. If somebody wants to create a brand or a product or bring anything to market, it's very similar to many other industries out there, but it becomes much more complicated because of the regulations of cannabis and how you're going to manufacture and make that product. And when you're making manufactured products in the state of California, before you even once you have your local authorization, you then have to follow the California Department of Public Health requirements for manufacturing, infusing, any cannabis product that's going to be labeled and packaged and distributed out of a facility that would end up going through a distribution company like River, or self-distributed by the company. Numismari is a manufacturer of a cannabis product line called Cannabis. They are currently operating in Nevada and are actually also coming to Los Angeles, and they make vape cartridges, concentrates, dry flower, as well as soon to be topicals. So as people look to enter the market, it really becomes very important to figure out what your end game is going to be, so that you can make sure that you have the capital that's necessary. Once you start a facility, you're going to have to buy the right equipment and all the different packaging and processing, testing. You might want to pre-test things before you send it out to testing. But then you need to make sure that your packaging is going to be compliant. And California's packaging laws are ever changing. They're trying to figure out right now.
They're trying to, basically the state's trying to figure out if they're going to extend what's called the grace period, where they're allowing companies to sell product not in child-resistant packaging, and with some of the other labels not tested. Essentially, you're supposed to stem around a 2017 product that hasn't been tested with the new testing standards set by the state. So
But when are they going to, actually, let's talk about when they're going to have the testing standard and what they're going to make that testing standard packaging requirement.
Well, it should, actually, everything, technically, by the way the regulations are written at this point, and just to inform you that we're operating under what's called emergency regulations, so they're temporary. But those are set to expire July 1st. Those requirements, kind of the grace period for that packaging, those packaging requirements and testing requirements. However, there's talk that they're going to actually extend the so-called grace period through the emergency regulation process, which they have every right to do. However, I mean, I'll just be completely honest with you, as a distributor, one of our main objectives, and one actually required by law, is to make sure that any product that we distribute is in that correct packaging, is tested, If they extend this grace period, it's just going to create more chaos. It's already in the system right now where people are basically like, they just think, hey, I got a grace period, I can do whatever I want. I don't have to test anything, I don't have to package anything accordingly. And that's going on, and that's hard to compete with because we compete with distributors that aren't doing that. We compete with brands who are not doing that or just skipping the distributor and going straight to the retailer. And you're like, the state's not going to enforce it, we're in the grace period. So that whole grace period, I see the point, but it needs to end to get some sanity back into the market and to reward all of the people who are taking the risk and getting their licenses and actually operating in this regulated market. This is serious business to me because this affects my company's bottom line. This affects the employees that work for my company. So like Ryan over there, he has to compete against the black market. He has to compete against licensed dispensaries or distributors who maybe not doing things right. And that affects his bottom line. That affects the money he brings home to his family. So there are people's jobs, people's livelihoods at risk. It's very, very serious business.
So I have a question that I'm sure a lot of people are asking or wondering. So I want to open a pot shop. I have $100,000. I can do a pot shop. How hard could it be? John?
$100,000 isn't going to get you there.
What kind of cash? Well, just a small little thing of it.
Can we just get a show of hands how many people are interested in the dispensary side? Okay, how many people are interested in the manufacturing side? How many people are interested in the cultivation side? Okay, cultivation, I'm going to go backwards now. Cultivation, depending on the size of it, is in the millions. There are cultivation facilities being built now that people would sit there and say, oh, back in the day in LA, I put that out for $700,000, $800,000. Those facilities today, to be regulatory compliant, cost millions and millions of dollars. Anywhere from $4 to $7 million, depending on the facility you're going into, to get a 22,000-foot canopy license up and operating. Manufacturing, how many people are interested in manufacturing? Manufacturing equipment might sound cheap that you're getting some equipment and it's $50,000 or $100,000. That's just the equipment to extract. That is not the equipment to do thin film processing, to actually a blast chamber to actually operate and process using your equipment in. Because if you're using volatile or non-volatile, you're still going to want to do it in a safe environment. You're going to have very strict air requirements, and you're going to have to use, depending on if you're using volatile solvents, meaning butane, propane, ethanol, any of those solvents, you're going to have to be in a blast-proof, Class 1, Division 1, spark-resistant type facility, and those containers can start at $100,000 and run up to $300,000, depending on what process and how much you're doing in there. Then let's talk about dispensary. Dispensary, anybody can go and find a shop and build out a retail store. It's not just building out a retail store. It's not building out a local five and dime type retail. You're actually going to want to put some security and some features in there. You're going to have security systems. Your security systems can run you $10,000 to $50,000 depending on your location. You're going to have safes in the back and cash control solutions in the back. Those can also run you anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000 to $30,000, $40,000 depending on how large of a facility you're building out. Then you're also going to want to have your intake and all of the different components and pieces of a compliant facility. So just your facility alone will run you hundreds of thousands of dollars. Then, once you have everything built and done and the city says you can open for business, you're going to want to stock your shelves. Stock your shelves properly and bring in the right amount of product so that you have a variety. It's not just jars on a shelf anymore. This is prepackaged, nicely done, Apple Store type experiences for the retailers that are going to make it. And to stock your stores properly from a wholesale perspective will be $100,000 to $200,000. So plan that it's going to cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars to open a store, but that investment, if done right and well, will pay off multiple times.
In this industry, how are we seeing investors willing to lend a hand to open these kind of facilities?
There are many different structures. So if somebody's a real estate investor, they're going to take that aspect of it. If somebody's a tech investor, they're going to look at it from their perspective. Every investor is going to have a different pain point that they're going to want to meet, and they're going to want to make sure it's secure. For the manufacturing side, I was speaking to somebody the other day. They said, well, I want to be secure, so I want to own the machines and the equipment, and I'll lease it to you. That gives them some security and so on. So for every investor is going to have their own way. What investors have to get comfortable with is still the cash nature of this industry. We do not have traditional banking for the cannabis space yet. This is still a cash industry, and everybody has to be comfortable that they are actually operating with large sums of cash and can put controls in place so that everybody knows the transparency of that amount of cash moving through the facilities.
Now, next question. I want to do deliveries. You know, I have a car. I can just do deliveries, right?
Come on, Francine.
I know better, but still. I'm trying to give an average question here for the people that will be watching this later or reading it in the paper.
Okay, so deliveries.
Let me say to have a delivery, you have to have a retail license.
Yes.
first, Right, so you gotta start there.
Or non-storefront retail.
Right, you gotta start with some sort of license, so just your car doesn't count, you have to have like a physical location where you're gonna store the cannabis and it's gonna be, organized, so you can safely send it out to whoever it is that you're delivering it to, and then your vehicle has to have different requirements, like a GPS system, you're gonna have to track everything that's coming in and going out. And so just from a legal perspective, operating a delivery is, quite onerous, even though it sounds like, oh, I just got a car and I'm gonna keep going and I'm good. It can be a challenge. And then from a logistics and financial perspective, it can be even more challenging, and I'm sure you can speak to that as well. But, instead of having a store that everyone can come to at one time, you can only hit so many customers at a time, so that can be a challenge. And then you've got your online portal, which can be a challenge, and then accepting money from people's credit card or bank account is also a challenge. So delivery is its own
Collecting taxes, if you deliver outside of your city, you're supposed to collect that tax rate and the city you made the delivery to. So you have to do everything John talked about, plus this whole delivery structure, and you can't carry more than $3,000 worth of product per delivery. You have to have a manifest for every delivery.
And you want to have safety practices because you're on the road, so you could get robbed. If your driver gets in an accident, was he under the influence? When you're on the road, obviously you're exposed to a larger degree of risk than if you're in a brick and mortar shop. That being said, all of us tend to shop online. We want everything delivered to our home. The retail experience is slowly dying, and some people don't want to walk into a dispensary. It's not a good feeling for some people. They don't feel comfortable, they don't know what to order, it's a new experience, and so that online option is a really good option, but there are a whole host of other hurdles you have to jump through.
So I'm wondering, with all of these rules and regulations, how it has and is more importantly going to affect the retail price.
The retail price has gone up since January 1st significantly.
Well, how about the last
taxes.
50 years and the last 10 and the next 5?
So,
Well, I can just say when I first started practicing as a criminal defense lawyer in cannabis in 2007, a pound went for $5,000 or $6,000. I had a client who just bought, 10 pounds at $800 a pound. So you can look at that from a perspective. In Colorado, we've seen that it's gone down. As it gets more and more legal, the cost wholesale goes down, but the retail price has gone up because of taxes and also limited supply, because there are so few licensed suppliers in the state of California. It's hard for a licensed dispensary to get actually the product, and so then that creates leverage for the vendor. But we will see this
even out and shift several times throughout the next 12 months, 18 months, and probably 36 months.
So that's a
I
good.
see as competition increases on the retail market,
Yeah.
you're going to see the prices go down. It's pretty common for a cannabis retailer to mark up 100% and maybe discount down a little bit. That's going to change as you see more competition. Those markups are going to become less and less. So I believe you're going to see that. But right now, we are dealing with 400 licensed shops in the 5th largest economy in the world. It's not a lot, and it's artificially constrained at this point. So yeah, you haven't seen the drop in prices yet, but as that competition comes, you will definitely see it. And you're seeing a lot of big dispensaries pop up, like that kind of have a, for lack of a better term, a Walmart model. So they're able to sell this product cheap, and that puts pressure on all the other retailers to mark down the product. So.
What does that say about the illegal side?
Well, the legal side doesn't have taxes, they don't have regulation, and then they can advertise their products on an online platform and put a fake license number and steer someone who thinks they're going into a legal cannabis shop to get a clean product. They can just walk in there unbeknownst and just buy product for half the price. So, that's the competition we deal with.
I believe that's a challenge we're facing in California in general, because it's not like we're starting with a clean slate. We're now trying to put regulation on top of something that's existed in a gray area circumstance for a long time. So where the market will be, inevitably, I think wholesale prices will decline. But it's going to take time in this state specifically for all of this to shake out, like Dave mentioned.
Yeah, and just to kind of, so River has operated since 2015, and we were in the collective model that we had a long discussion about. So we got our state license, and our state license went into effect January 1st. So we went from working with 2,000 plus collectives in the state to less than 100 dispensaries on January 1. So like January was by far the worst month that we've ever had sales-wise, and we're slowly building that up. So I mean, even the 300 shops we're in now is pales in comparison to 2,000 plus shops that we were able to sell product. So that's the reality of the regulated market.
This might not be a proper venue to ask this question, but the city has or is in negotiations to sell a commercial facility that's owned by the city to be used as a cultivator. I think it's a 2A license. What protections is the city establishing at this point?
From what perspective?
Well,
If they sell the property, if they sell the property, the city's going to receive the revenue from that sale.
Yes.
So there's
Well,
this.
right off the bat, you have a problem with the OTC and the claims, which violates the FDA rules of when you say aspirin, it'll get rid of the headache. Unless it's properly written, it's an OTC. That's either a drug, that's a food.
Well, they can't make those claims. A cannabis manufacturer can't make claims like, this will cure a headache or
Right,
they can't
right.
do that.
But by the city giving recognition, isn't it doing that?
No, because the city's actually selling a piece of property. They're not leasing the property or anything.
But
Once they
there's a
sell the
use.
property.
There's a use, the city's asking, the city's attorney, with the city's attorneys all the time, which I'm sure the city has capable attorneys. They're saying, well, what are you going to manufacture and what claims are you going to make?
Well, they can't ask what the claims are going to be because I can go and manufacture sprinklers in the warehouse here in Oxnard and say that I'm going to be the best sprinkler in the country. It doesn't mean that that's always going to be true.
I think you'll agree that an aggressive federal prosecutor can do anything they want.
The feds are not going to come after this industry, and they've already, look, we have 29 states and the District of Columbia that have existing marijuana.
I'm on your side.
No, I know, but let's just state the facts and to see where the direction is going right now. You have the majority of this country shifting towards legalization.
I'm the guy who says you need CUPs.
You definitely do need a CUP.
But no one else here is saying anything to do with CUPs.
I
Not
don't think we're
one
up to that.
gentleman.
I don't think we're up to that stage yet in this discussion. Because in order for a facility to operate legally, it needs to be licensed by the local municipality. In order to be licensed by the local municipality, you have to comply with their local regulations. This gentleman's building a facility in Los Angeles, in a city just south of Los Angeles. His biggest thing right now is getting his permits to build out so that he can get his conditional use permit for cultivation.
So they are asking for conditional.
Yes,
Yeah,
they have to.
most cities are, but I'm just,
But 2 minutes ago, you were saying most cities are.
No, I mean, you usually do.
no, I said that
Need
we,
conditional use
that
permits.
the city we're,
Honest.
I said the cities we were in, we do development agreements.
Hundreds of stores you said you did business with. Yet you only mentioned 4 cities that ask for permits.
The question,
Well-
the question was, should we have, what's with conditional use permits? And our response is that a lot of businesses don't prefer them because of X, Y, and Z.
Right.
But a lot of cities do require them or a process that is similar to a
Right, but
CUP.
at the end, conditional use permit is, there's no questions asked. Prove to me you're gonna run your business the way you said you would. And that's why cities ask for conditional use permits. I received conditional use permits. I had it going through terrible crap. And of course, there was terrible crap because I had to get it. If I was on the other side, if I was a city attorney, it would make a lot of sense. Because all of a sudden, the city owns. I'm going to fight.
Well, then you can talk with them after, they'll be here. Okay, final
More than happy to help
question?
you.
Final 2 questions?
Just to clarify, the city of Fort Hueneme requires both conditional use permit and a development agreement.
It does.
It does.
I mean, at the end of the day, I could care less how you do it, if you're a retailer or whatever, you go through a CUP or a DA, I don't care if you're open
You
and
better
buying
care.
product.
You better care, because at the end, when they sue you, they sue John Doe's 1 through 100.
Well, they're not gonna sue my distribution company, I'm talking about, we want retailers open, and whatever means it takes to get them open.
Prosecutor will sue Jane Doe's 1 through 100.
In our experience, we have to acquire both a CUP and finalize a development agreement. And I think a lot of municipalities are taking that approach.
Question in the back?
Yeah, so I know you spoke earlier to community involvement, and I know for the city of Fort Hueneme, we've been blessed already with the retailers that opened up and are engaged in the community. But I'm wondering if you can speak to any success stories that other businesses have flourished because of the cannabis industry coming to their city.
Well, I can say, the city of West Sacramento, we've funded, community development projects. Since our time there, probably the gross receipts tax, we've given well over, probably close to $3 million to a small industrial city, from our work there. There's lots of examples. You go to the city of Sacramento, they have, which is the second largest retail location. So they have the second largest retail market for cannabis in the entire state of California. They do all sorts of great things for the city, and they fund community development projects. They do training programs for employees. I mean, there's just a ton of stuff that the industry's doing that we don't get a lot of credit for, but.
Yeah, so let me rephrase my question. Have you seen other industries increase? Hotels, restaurants, retail, any anecdotal of any?
I would say anecdotally, yes. I mean, yeah, you do see additional business creation from the cannabis industry. It just is what it is. I mean, you build a business, and there's a coffee shop next door. They're probably, maybe they go get coffee before they go get their cannabis. Maybe they eat more pizza, which is it's one of the side effects of cannabis. I mean, there's a lot of different things. The jobs we create tax revenue for the state. If you have tourism, which is going to be, you know, it hasn't really kicked in yet. Once we get this regulated market off the ground, the tourism industry for cannabis in California is going to be huge. So we create jobs, and those employees go out and they spend money, and they buy products, and they raise money for the state.
And the businesses also support other businesses in the community. But are you asking about other industries that are being supportive of community benefits, or are you?
I'm just thinking where there was other growth potential for a small city that has now taken this on to be a new revenue stream. What other benefits could the city or the county see
All of
being
the other
productive?
All of the other surrounding businesses will continue to grow and gain additional clients and support and services and use of those products and businesses threefold, like any other time a new industry starts to become prevalent in the community. Every business from a supermarket to a supplier is going to see an increase in their foot traffic, because when you have more people, there's more need.
I also think an important element is in a lot of these municipalities, there's industrial manufacturing areas that have largely gone downhill over the last 2 decades that are getting a complete and utter facelift from now allowing for commercial cannabis businesses to come into those areas that do zone out and kind of revitalize those sections of the community.
Yeah, the building we're in West Sacramento is like completely ran down when they're renovated it, put all these cameras, lights, gates. It's a much better property now.
Yeah.
Also a lot safer. So.
They also police the community.
Yeah, I would say, especially in Los Angeles, in South Los Angeles, which has been largely, kind of downtrodden and had a lot of socioeconomic problems, and are using this industry to kind of lift that up, beautify, enrich, engage. And a lot of communities and cities require, as part of the application or the business plan, a community engagement plan. And so that's been a really interesting thing to see, which businesses are we going to award permits to based on what their plan is to enrich the community.
And then the tax revenue, like, every city, most cities have a gross receipts tax. And the cannabis industry, and I'm not saying we're the magic bullet and we're going to cure all the city's problems, because we're not, just to be honest. But a lot of those taxes go to help the city get out of trouble with debt, pension debt, and with all sorts of debt that they may have. And this shouldn't be lost, but that's why cities are welcoming us, because we help with those problems. It's a good thing.
Don't push too many taxes.
And then, question in the
We're
back.
taxed, no longer are.
Question in the back.
To what Tracy is talking about, I think it's really relevant in Fort Hueneme for a couple of reasons. And John just mentioned marketing. That's the key word. We have an area over here of shops. We have an area over here, area over here. The one that has cannabis or any other major product that draws people in there, they're into, people like one-stop shopping if you can. So all the businesses around there will benefit. And that was a big problem here in the beginning, was getting the landlords of the, of the shopping centers to agree to let their retail spaces be used. They're coming around, and they will see a great increase in traffic, which is the key.
And also know that dispensary owners are very sensitive to the community. They're very much in tune with wanting to preserve and make the community a better place than when they came. So as I mentioned a moment ago, policing it, their security is their #1 concern, and they are very much involved with the local law enforcement, fire, all the different agencies to make sure that the community is safer where their stores are, which benefits everybody else.
We have to be a good neighbor. If we're a bad neighbor, people are going to complain, and then we're not going to be able to do business. So, and that's the last thing we want.
Okay, let's give our panelists a round of applause. So thank you all for showing.
We have a newsletter that goes out once a month. If you guys want to be a part of that, you can give me your business card or your email address. And
So network meetings, there's still plenty of water, cupcakes. If you don't need the cupcakes, I have
Thank you.
to. So please.